Mysteries await just a page away. Ready to dive in? Welcome to The Book Reader, where stories unfold one enchanting page at a time. Subscribe now and unlock the magic.
Part 2. Consequence Analyses. Chapter 13. Thursday, February 20th to Friday, March 7th. During the last week of February, Salander acted as her own client, with Björman, N., born 1950, as a high-priority special project. She worked almost 16 hours every day doing a more thorough personal investigation than she had ever done before. She made use of all the archives and public documents she could lay her hands on. She investigated his circle of relatives and friends. She looked at his finances and mapped out every detail of his upbringing and career. The results were discouraging. He was a lawyer, member of the Bar Association, and author of a respectably long-winded but exceptionally tedious dissertation on finance law. His reputation was spotless. Advocate Björman had never been censured. On only one occasion was he reported to the Bar Association. He was accused nearly 10 years ago of being the middleman in an under-the-table property deal, but he had been able to prove his innocence. His finances were in good order. Björman was well-to-do, with at least 10 million kroner in assets. He paid more taxes than he owed, was a member of Greenpeace and Amnesty International, and he donated money to the Heart and Lung Association. He had rarely appeared in the mass media, although on several occasions he had signed his name to public appeals for political prisoners in the Third World. He lived in a 5-room apartment on Upplands Gatan near Odenplan, and he was the secretary of his co-op apartment association. He was divorced and had no children. Salander focused on his ex-wife, whose name was Elena. She was born in Poland but had lived all her life in Sweden. She worked at a rehabilitation center and was apparently happily remarried to one of Björman's former colleagues. Nothing useful there. The Björman marriage had lasted 14 years, and the divorce went through without disputes. Advocate Björman regularly acted as a supervisor for youths who got into trouble with the law. He had been trustee for 4 youths before he became Salander's guardian. All of these cases involved minors, and the assignments came to an end with a court decision when they came of age. One of these clients still consulted Björman in his role as advocate, so there did not seem to be any animosity there either. If Björman had been systematically exploiting his wards, there was no sign of it, and no matter how deeply Salander probed, she could find no trace of wrongdoing. All 4 had established lives for themselves with a boyfriend or girlfriend. They all had jobs, places to live, and co-op debit cards. She called each of the 4 clients, introducing herself as a social welfare secretary working on a study about how children hitherto under the care of a trustee fared later in life compared to other children. Yes, naturally, everyone will be anonymous. She had put together a questionnaire with 10 questions, which she asked on the telephone. Several of the questions were designed to get the respondents to give their views on how well the trusteeship had functioned. If they had any opinions about their own trustee, Advocate Björman wasn't it. No one had anything bad to say about him. When Salander completed her ferreting, she gathered up the documents in a bag from Ica and put it out with the 20 bags of old newspapers out the hall. Björman was apparently beyond reproach. There was nothing in his past that she could use. She knew beyond a doubt that he was a creep and a pig, but she could find nothing to prove it. It was time to consider another option. After all the analyses were done, one possibility remained that started to look more and more attractive, or at least seemed to be a truly realistic alternative. The easiest thing would be for Björman simply to disappear from her life. A quick heart attack. End of problem. The catch was that not even disgusting 53-year-old men had heart attacks at her beck and call. But that sort of thing could be arranged. Blomkvist carried on his affair with headmistress Cecilia Vanger with the greatest discretion. She had 3 rules. She didn't want anyone to know they were meeting. She wanted him to come over only when she called and was in the mood. And she didn't want him to stay all night. Her passion surprised and astonished him. When he ran into her at Suzanne's, she was friendly but cool and distant. When they met in her bedroom, she was wildly passionate. Blomkvist did not want to pry into her personal life, but he had been hired to pry into the personal lives of everyone in the Vanger family. He felt torn and at the same time curious. One day he asked Vanger whom she had been married to and what had happened. He asked the question while they were discussing the background of Alexander and Berger. Cecilia? I don't think she had anything to do with Harriet. Tell me about her background. She moved back here after graduating and started working as a teacher. She met a man by the name of Jerry Carlson, who unfortunately worked for the Vanger Corporation. They married. I thought the marriage was a happy one, anyway, in the beginning. But after a couple of years I began to see that things were not as they should be. He mistreated her. It was the usual story. He beat her and she loyally defended him. Finally he hit her one time too many. She was seriously hurt and ended up in the hospital. I offered my help. She moved out here to Hedeby Island and has refused to see her husband since. I made sure he was fired. But they are still married? It's a question of how you define it. I don't know why she hasn't filed for divorce. But she has never wanted to remarry, so I suppose it hasn't made any difference. This Carlson, did he have anything to do with Harriet? No, he wasn't in Hedestad in 1966, and he wasn't yet working for the firm. Okay. Michael, I'm fond of Cecilia. She can be tricky to deal with, but she's one of the good people in my family. Salander devoted a week to planning Nils Bjurman's demise. She considered, and rejected, various methods until she had narrowed it down to a few realistic scenarios from which to choose. No acting on impulse. Only one condition had to be fulfilled. Bjurman had to die in such a way that she herself could never be linked to the crime. The fact that she would be included in any eventual police investigation she took for granted. Sooner or later her name would show up when Bjurman's responsibilities were examined. But she was only one person in a whole universe of present and former clients. She had met him only 4 times, and there would not be any indication that his death even had a connection with any of his clients. There were former girlfriends, relatives, casual acquaintances, colleagues, and others. There was also what was usually defined as random violence, when the perpetrator and victim did not know each other. If her name came up, she would be a helpless, incompetent girl with documents showing her to be mentally deficient. So it would be an advantage if Bjurman's death occurred in such a complicated manner that it would be highly unlikely that a mentally handicapped girl could be the perpetrator. She rejected the option of using a gun. Acquiring a gun would be no great problem, but the police were awfully good at tracking down firearms. She considered a knife, which could be purchased at any hardware store, but decided against that too. Even if she turned up without warning and drove the knife into his back, there was no guarantee that he would die instantly and without making a sound, or that he would die at all. Worse, it might provoke a struggle, which could attract attention, and blood could stain her clothes, be evidence against her. She thought about using a bomb of some sort, but it would be much too complicated. Building the bomb itself would not be a problem. The internet was full of manuals on how to make the deadliest devices. It would be difficult, on the other hand, to find a place to put the bomb so that innocent passers-by would not be hurt. Besides, there was again no guarantee that he would actually die. The telephone rang. "Hi, Lisbeth. Dragan. I've got a job for you. I don't have time. This is important. I'm busy." She put down the receiver. Finally she settled on poison. The choice surprised her, but on closer consideration it was perfect. Salander spent several days combing the internet. There were plenty to choose from. One of them was among the most deadly poisons known to science, hydrocyanic acid, commonly known as prussic acid. Prussic acid was used as a component in certain chemical industries, including the manufacture of dyes. A few milligrams were enough to kill a person. 1 liter in a reservoir could wipe out a medium-sized city. Obviously, such a lethal substance was kept under strict control. But it could be produced in almost unlimited quantities in an ordinary kitchen. All that was needed was a modest amount of laboratory equipment, and that could be found in a chemistry set for children for a few hundred kroner, along with several ingredients that could be extracted from ordinary household products. The manual for the process was on the internet. Another option was nicotine. From a carton of cigarettes she could extract enough milligrams of the substance and heat it to make a viscous syrup. An even better substance, although slightly more complex to produce, was nicotine sulfate, which had the property that it could be absorbed through the skin. All she would have to do was put on rubber gloves, fill a water pistol, and spray Björman in the face. Within 20 seconds he should be unconscious, and within a few minutes he would be dead as a doornail. Salander had had no idea that so many household products could be transformed into deadly weapons. After studying the subject for several days, she was persuaded that there were no technical impediments to making short work of her guardian. There were two problems. Björman's death would not of itself give her back control of her own life, and there was no guarantee that Björman's successor would be an improvement. Analysis of the consequences. What she needed was a way to control her guardian and thus her own situation. She sat on the worn sofa in her living room for one whole evening running through the situation in her mind. By the end of the night, she had scrapped the idea of murder by poison and put together a new plan. It was not an appealing option, and it required her to allow Björman to attack her again. But if she carried it off, she would have won. At least, so she thought. By the end of February Blomkvist fell into a daily routine that transformed his stay in Hedeby. He got up at 9 o'clock every morning, ate breakfast, and worked until noon. During this time he would cram new material into his head. Then he would take an hour-long walk, no matter what the weather was like. In the afternoon he would go on working, either at home or at Suzanne's Bridge Café, processing what he had read in the morning or writing sections of what would be Vanger's autobiography. Between 3 o'clock and 6 o'clock he was always free. He would shop for groceries, do his laundry, go into Hedestad. Around 7 o'clock he would go over to see Vanger to ask him questions that had arisen during the day. By 10 o'clock he was home, and he would read until 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning. He was working systematically through Vanger's documents. The work of shaping the autobiography was moving smoothly. He had written 120 pages of the family chronicle in rough draft. He had reached the 1920s. Beyond this point he would have to move more slowly and start weighing his words. Through the library in Hedestad he had ordered books dealing with Nazism during that time, including Helena Loh's doctoral dissertation, The Swastika and the Wasserschief, which dealt with the symbols adopted by the German and Swedish Nazis. He had drafted another 40 pages about Vanger and his brothers, focusing on Vanger as the person holding the story together. He had a list of subjects he needed to research on the way the company operated during that time. And he had discovered that the Vanger family was also heavily involved in Ivar Kreuger's empire, another side story he had to explore. He estimated that he had about 300 pages left to write. According to the schedule he had devised, he wanted to have a final draft for Henrik Vanger to look at by the 1st of September, so that he could spend the autumn revising the text. For all his reading and listening, Blomkvist had made not an inch of progress in the Harriet Vanger case. No matter how much he brooded over the details in the files, he could find not a single piece of information that contradicted the investigative report. One Saturday evening in late February he had a conversation with Vanger in which he reported on his lack of progress. The old man listened patiently as Blomkvist listed all the dead ends he had run into. "No crime is perfect," Vanger said. "I'm sure we must have missed something. We still can't say whether a crime was committed." "Keep at it," Vanger said. "Finish the job. It's pointless." "Maybe so. But don't give up." Blomkvist sighed. "The telephone numbers," he said at last. "Yes. They have to mean something." "I agree. They were written down for some purpose." "Yes. But we can't interpret them." "No. Or else we're interpreting them wrong." "Precisely. They're not telephone numbers. They mean something." "Maybe so. Michael sighed again and went home to continue reading. Advocate Bjurman was relieved when Salander called again and explained that she needed more money. She had postponed their most recent scheduled meeting with the excuse that she had to work, and a vague sense of uneasiness gnawed at him. Was she going to turn into an unmanageable problem child? But since she had missed the meeting, she had no allowance, and sooner or later she would be bound to come and see him. He could not help but be concerned that she might have discussed what had happened with some outsider. She was going to have to be kept in check. She had to understand who was in charge. So he told her that this time the meeting would be at his home near Odenplan, not at the office. Upon hearing this news, Salander was silent for a long time on the other end of the telephone before she finally agreed. She had planned to meet him at his office, exactly like last time. Now she was forced to see him in unfamiliar territory. The meeting was set for Friday evening. She had been given the building code, and she rang his doorbell at 8:30, half an hour later than agreed. That was how much time she had needed in the darkness of the building's stairwell to run through her plan one last time, consider alternatives, steel herself, and mobilize the courage she would need. At 8 o'clock Blomkvist switched off his computer and put on his outdoor clothing. He left the lights on in his office. Outside the sky was bright with stars and the night was freezing. He walked briskly up the hill, past Vanger's house, taking the road to Ostergarden. Beyond Vanger's house he turned off to the left, following an uglier path along the shore. The lighted buoys flickered out on the water, and the lights from Hedestad gleamed prettily in the dark. He needed fresh air, but above all he wanted to avoid the spying eyes of Isabella Vanger. Not far from Martin Vanger's house he rejoined the road and arrived at Cecilia Vanger's door just after 8:30. They went straight to her bedroom. They met once or twice a week. Cecilia had not only become his lover out here in his place of exile, she had also become the person he had begun to confide in. It was significantly more rewarding discussing Harriet Vanger with her than with her uncle. The plan began to go wrong almost from the start. Bjurman was wearing a bathrobe when he opened the door to his apartment. He was cross at her arriving late and motioned her brusquely inside. She was wearing black jeans, a black t-shirt, and the obligatory leather jacket. She wore black boots and a small rucksack with a strap across her chest. "Haven't you even learned to tell the time?" Bjurman said. Salander did not reply. She looked around. The apartment looked much as she had expected after studying the building plans in the archives of the city zoning office. The light-colored furniture was birch and beech wood. "Come on," Bjurman said in a friendlier tone. He put his arm around her shoulders and led her down a hall into the apartment's interior. No small talk. He opened the door to the bedroom. There was no doubt as to what services Salander was expected to perform. She took a quick look around. Bachelor furnishings. A double bed with a high bedstead of stainless steel. A low chest of drawers that also functioned as a bedside table. Bedside lamps with muted lighting. A wardrobe with a mirror along one side. A cane chair and a small desk in the corner next to the door. He took her by the hand and led her to the bed. "Tell me what you need money for this time. More computer accessories?" "Food," she said. "Of course. How stupid of me. You missed our last meeting." He placed his hand under her chin and lifted her face so their eyes met. "How are you?" She shrugged. "Have you thought about what I said last time?" "About what?" "Lisbeth, don't act any more stupid than you are. I want us to be good friends and to help each other out." She said nothing. Advocate Bjurman resisted an impulse to give her a slap, to put some life into her. "Did you like our grown-up game from last time?" "No." He raised his eyebrows. "Lisbeth, don't be foolish. I need money to buy food." "But that's what we talked about last time. If you're nice to me, I'll be nice to you. But if you're just going to cause trouble..." His grip on her chin tightened and she twisted away. "I want my money. What do you want me to do?" "You know what I want." He grabbed her shoulder and pulled her towards the bed. Wait, Salander said hastily. She gave him a resigned look and then nodded curtly. She took off her rucksack and leather jacket with the rivets and looked around. She put her jacket on the chair, set her rucksack on the round table, and took several hesitant steps to the bed. Then she stopped, as if she had cold feet. Björman came closer. Wait, she said once more, in a tone as if to say that she was trying to talk sense into him. I don't want to have to suck your dick every time I need money. The expression on Björman's face suddenly changed. He slapped her hard. Salander opened her eyes wide, but before she could react, he grabbed her by the shoulder and threw her onto the bed. The violence caught her by surprise. When she tried to turn over, he pressed her down on the bed and straddled her. Like the time before, she was no match for him in terms of physical strength. Her only chance of fighting back was if she could hurt him by scratching his eyes or using some sort of weapon. But her planned scenario had already gone to hell. Shit, she thought when he ripped off her t-shirt. She realized with terrifying clarity that she was out of her depth. She heard him open the dresser drawer next to the bed and caught the clanking sound of metal. At first she did not understand what was happening. Then she saw the handcuffs close around her wrist. He pulled up her arm, placed the handcuffs around one of the bedposts, and locked her other hand. It did not take him long to pull off her boots and jeans. Then he took off her knickers and held them in his hand. You have to learn to trust me, Lisbeth, he said. I'm going to teach you how this grown-up game is played. If you don't treat me well, you have to be punished. When you're nice to me, we'll be friends. He sat astride her again. So you don't like anal sex, he said. Salander opened her mouth to scream. He grabbed her hair and stuffed the knickers in her mouth. She felt him putting something around her ankles, spread her legs apart and tie them so that she was lying there completely vulnerable. She heard him moving around the room, but she could not see through the t-shirt around her face. It took him several minutes. She could hardly breathe. Then she felt an excruciating pain as he forced something up her anus. Cecilia Vanger still had a rule that Blomkvist was not to stay all night. Sometime after 2 o'clock in the morning he began to dress while she lay naked on the bed, smiling at him. I like you, Michael. I like your company. I like you too. She pulled him back to the bed and took off the shirt he had just put on. He stayed for 1 more hour. When later he passed by Vanger's house, he was sure he saw one of the curtains shift upstairs. Salander was allowed to put on her clothes. It was 4 o'clock on Saturday morning. She picked up her leather jacket and rucksack and hobbled to the front door, where he was waiting for her, showered and neatly dressed. He gave her a check for 2,500 kroner. I'll drive you home, he said, and opened the door. She crossed the threshold, out of the apartment, and turned to face him. Her body looked fragile and her face was swollen from crying, and he almost recoiled when he met her eyes. Never in his life had he seen such naked, smoldering hatred. Salander looked just as deranged as her casebook indicated. No, she said, so quietly that he barely heard the word. I can get home on my own. He put a hand on her shoulder. Are you sure? She nodded. His grip on her shoulder tightened. Remember what we agreed. You'll come back here next Saturday. She nodded again. Cowed. He let her go.
And that marks the end of the current chapter. Thank you for listening to The Book Reader. Stay tuned for the next episode tomorrow. Please subscribe for updates.